All right, let's look at another method that is market-based. Earlier we looked at one of the other market-based ones, the sales value at split off. That particular one is available for our use when the sales value at the split off is known. But occasionally we actually have to take and invest additional funds into a product in order to process it further and sell it for a different and higher amount. All right, so we are going to take the same scenario that we had earlier, but we are going to process those items and sell them as different products at a higher cost per gallon. So we're going to use the one that's called the net realizable value. All right, so this one allocates joint cost, those costs incurred up to the split off point, to joint products produced during the accounting period on the basis of what is called the relative net realizable value. Okay, so we know when we see the word relative, we're talking about using those weights yet again. All right, so the NRV, or net realizable value, stands for coming up with an amount when we take the gross or final sales value, and that is for all the product produced during the period, not just for what is sold during the period, but the actual gross sales for all, minus the separable cost, the cost incurred after the split off point for those individual products. We're going to calculate the NRV for each one of those products, and then we're going to do our weighting process. In many cases, products are processed beyond the split off point to bring them to a marketable form or to increase their value above their selling price at the split off point, like I mentioned. All right, so we're continuing use of our example information where we've got that dairy processing company. They bring in or purchase 110,000 gallons of raw milk from farms, and they process it further. So they take the raw milk and they turn it into cream and liquid skim, but they can actually take the cream and process it further. They will incur an additional $280,000 in processing cost just for taking the cream and turning it into another product called buttercream. But the buttercream can be sold for $25 a gallon, not $8 a gallon like the regular cream. And then the liquid skim, which typically sells for $4 a gallon, is going to get processed further, incurring an additional processing cost of $520,000, and then they will be able to sell it as condensed milk for $22 a gallon instead of that $4 a gallon for liquid skim. All right, so here is an illustration of what we're talking about. Again, what we are wanting to do is allocate these joint costs to the products being sold. And what we are selling this time is buttercream and condensed milk. All right, so $400,000 needs to be allocated. Each product, however, had what is called separable cost, cost incurred after the split off point, once they are separate. Okay, so $280,000 is incurred to turn the cream into buttercream, and $520,000 is incurred to turn the liquid skim into condensed milk. Now I want you guys to see what's happening here during the process. Notice that we had 110,000 gallons of raw milk. During the process, we ended up with cream and liquid skim, but notice 25,000 gallons plus 75,000 gallons, we lost 10,000 gallons of raw milk due to the process and evaporation, etc. And then notice here at the end that the buttercream, we only end up producing 20,000 gallons when we started with 25,000 gallons of cream. And our condensed milk, we ended with 50,000 gallons, though we started out with 75,000 gallons. So during the process, there's some things happen. So as these gallons get smaller and smaller during the process, what do you guys think is happening to the end price per gallon? Okay, we are having to spread more cost across smaller gallons. So that means our cost per gallon is actually increasing over time due to the fact that not only are we spending more money, that causes us enough increase, but the fact that we're also losing numbers or quantity in that denominator is making it go up per gallon even more. All right, so we produced 20,000 gallons of buttercream and we produced 50,000 of condensed milk, but we did not sell all of it. Okay, so those are the numbers for what was produced. Here are the rest of our stats. Again, we're trying to spread the joint cost across the two end products that we're selling. The buttercream had separable cost after the split off point of $280,000, and that's what we spent on taking cream to buttercream. And then the condensed milk, we spent $520,000 taking it from liquid skim to condensed milk. In regards to our sales for the period, we produced 20,000 gallons of buttercream, but we're only selling 12,000 of those this period. That means we do have 8,000 in ending inventory. So we need to be able to calculate cost of goods sold for the 12,000 units, and we need an ending inventory value for the ending inventory for the balance sheet. Same kind of scenario here with the condensed milk. We produced 50, but we only sold 45. Therefore, we have 5,000 left in ending inventory. We need to come up with cost of goods sold, and we need to come up with ending inventory values. The selling price for those, again, was $25 and $22. All right, so how do we go about doing this? Again, net realizable value. What is the net realizable value for everything produced? Not just what was sold during the period. We are going to take the gross possible sales for everything produced, and then we are going to deduct the separable cost in order to get the net realizable value. All right, so if we were to sell all 20,000 gallons produced of buttercream at the selling price of $25 per gallon, we would have $500,000 in revenues. For the condensed milk, if we sold all 50,000 gallons produced at $22 per gallon, that would be $1.1 million for a total of $1.6. We're going to deduct the separable cost on a per item basis. Buttercream had an additional $280,000 incurred to get it from cream to buttercream, so we're going to subtract that $280 from the $500 in order to get its net realizable value at the split off. And then the condensed milk, $520,000 extra was incurred in order to get it from the liquid skim to the condensed milk. All right, so $1.1 million minus that $520,000 in separable costs for just that one line item means our NRV at the split off for condensed milk is $580,000. Again, totaling those items up over here, we've got $800,000 NRV total at the split off. Now, let's calculate those weights. All right, so 220,000 NRV for buttermilk. Over 800,000 equals 27.5%. And of course, the remaining 72.5, those two numbers are adding up to 100%, goes to condensed milk. You could also calculate it as 580 over 800. We then use those weights times the joint cost. All right, so 400,000 times 0.275 equals 110,000, and 400,000 times the 0.725 equals 290. All right, so buttercream now has 280,000 in separable cost and 110,000 allocated to it of the joint cost for a total. We are going to take that total, 390,000, and divide it by 20,000 gallons in order to get our price per gallon or cost per gallon. This cost per gallon is not only joint cost, but it is also the separable cost. So $19.50 per gallon for the buttercream. We would do the same thing for condensed milk. 290,000 allocated plus the 520 in separable cost gives us everything we have incurred to produce said condensed milk. We would then take that number and divide it by the 50,000 gallons produced to get that price per gallon or cost per gallon of $16.20. And we can now use that in working through our income statement. All right, so our revenues, again, we did not sell all 20,000 gallons produced. We only sold 12,000 gallons of the buttercream. So that means we're going to have ending inventory of 8. 20 minus 12 equals 8. For the units we sold, we've got that increased selling price. This new product here, buttercream, is $25 per gallon. That gives us 300,000 in revenues. And then the condensed milk, we produced 50,000. We only sold 45,000. Then we're going to have ending inventory of 5,000. The 45,000 gallons we sold was at a price of $22 per gallon, so total revenues is 990,000. Again, these total columns over here on the far right, you guys know just to sum these up and put the total right there. To do cost of goods sold, we have already allocated these numbers above. We're bringing down what buttercream was allocated in joint cost. Again, it was the 27.5% of 400,000, which gives us 110, and the 290 remaining thousand went to the condensed milk. And then we have their separable cost on here. Okay, so 110 plus 280,000 is that 390,000. Take that 390,000 and we need to subtract from that what we have left in ending inventory. This 390,000 was the cost to produce all 20,000 gallons. We need to hold out some of that for our ending inventory for our balance sheet. So we had 8,000 gallons remaining of buttercream at that $19.50 per gallon that we calculated. Means 156,000 is still here in ending inventory. Subtracting that from 390,000 gives us the cost of goods sold. And then of course we can calculate our gross margin by subtracting that from revenues for the period. We've got 66,000, and then we can calculate that as a gross margin percentage by taking 66,000 and dividing it by revenues. Same process over here on the condensed milk. 290,000 was allocated of the joint cost to condensed milk. We did that up here. And 520,000 is how much was spent on their separable cost after the split off point for a total production cost or total investment in that product of 810,000. We need to hold out, though, the ending inventory. We've got 5,000 gallons of the 50 produced still here in ending inventory. We can use that per gallon amount that we calculated. 5,000 gallons at $16.20 per gallon means $81,000 worth is still here. We subtract that from the $810. We get cost of goods sold for the other 45,000 gallons of $729,000. Subtracting that from total sales, we get gross margin. Gross margin over revenues equals the gross margin percentage. So notice we've got 22% for the buttercream, but 26.4% for the condensed milk. If we do it as a total, we're in between those two numbers at 25.3. So again, the net realizable value method allocates joint costs to joint products produced during the accounting period on the basis of their relative NRV, which is their final sales value for everything produced minus the separable cost incurred. The NRV method is typically used in preference to the sales value at split-off method only when selling prices for one or more products at the split-off do not exist. All right, so the one we saw earlier, we knew a selling price at the split-off for that cream and the liquid skim. Okay, so that method is preferable. The sales value at the split-off method is preferable. But what if the liquid skim was not sellable at the split-off and had to have additional investment in it to bring it to condensed milk? Then we would need to use an NRV method instead. The NRV method is often implemented using simplifying assumptions. For example, even when selling prices of joint products vary frequently, companies still implement the NRV method using a given set of selling prices throughout the accounting period.